In this video, we're going to go through every step of my water infrastructure automation using Node-RED. But first, let's go outside. Okay, so before we start, there's a disclaimer for this video. I live on a farm, and some of what you'll see in this video is very farm DIY quality. What I mean is that some of the installation might not be the best you've ever seen, and there might be exposed wires here and there and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a farm. Everything works beautifully, and everything that I'm going to explain in the video is absolutely valid. Having said that, if you see something that you think I could do better, do feel free to put it in the comment. I may or may not have already thought of it and have a plan to improve it, or if I don't, well, thank you, right? So please do comment. Now, having said that, on the farm we have two watering systems in general. So we have the bore tank, which is the pump shed I'm in front. So the bore is actually right underneath us, about 60 meters down. And that feeds a lot of the garden irrigation stuff. There's a big network underground that was put in before we took over the property, which has pipes everywhere, and that's fed from this pump shed here. And then we have the other system, which is all the water tanks and rainwater tanks, which is separate in a sense. But what I've done is I've sort of combined the two because we need to be on top of this water situation, because in summer here, it gets hot, it gets dry, and we have run out of water once, and it's not much fun. So we want to be on top of the water, hence I've put in this quite elaborate system, which I will explain now. But first, let me just show you what's in the pump shed, and I'll come get you. All right, so in here, there's the dog. Hi, Hunter. And since you're here, look who's watching. Hi, guys. Very curious creatures. Anyway, let's go in the pump shed. It's cold outside. So in here, these two are actually not used anymore, but they weigh about as much as the moon. So, and I can't get them out because of this thing. Anyway, so they're here. So in here, there is there's a bore tank, here, not a bore tank, there's a bore down that hole. There's a wire that goes down there, way down there, 60 meters. And that's connected up to this, which is how it gets switched on and off. However, I'm using these son-off, and here's one of the beautiful installations. But this is weatherproof, right? Anyway, so that is a son-off that controls the bore pump, and that is a son-off that controls the transfer pump, which is another pump here, that one there, which pushes water down the hill. So that's the system. So there is a bore pump there that fills up the bore tank, which is out here. That's that one. So that pumps water up into that tank there. And then on this tank, I have a sensor, which is down here. If we can get to it, there's a lot of grass right now. It's very wet. Oh. Ow. Oh. Down here, hello. There, you see it? That is the pressure sensor, which I've made another video on, which is linked up there. And that is what measures how much water is in the bore tank, so that I don't have to climb up on the side of it and look into it. And that goes up way up there, and it goes all across, and it comes in to the pump shed. So let's just go back to the pump shed. So that goes across here in conduit, goes in there, and then down here is another beautiful farm installation. There's a Adam light there, which is that little thing there, covered in cobweb. Well, that doesn't do anything. And that sends signal to Home Assistant on the voltage of the pressure sensor. Anyway, there's a whole video on that I've done. So that is part one. Now, because I'm just going to put you back on here on the tripod so I can talk to you. So because of that, we can now fill the bore tank automatically, because we know how much water is in it. We can turn it on and off automatically, and we can turn the transfer pump on and off automatically. So that's step one of the system. So let's go down to the wool shed which is step 2. All right, so that's the woolshed, which is also where my office is, and that's the woolshed tank. So that's sort of the second step in this chain of managing water on the farm. So for this tank, I have a sensor, of course, that measures how much water is in the tank. And then there is a Shelly Uni, which that is hooked up to empower it. And then also to the Shelly Uni, there is a solenoid switch for the water, so I can turn water on and off. And that's powered by DC, AC rather, just to make it confusing. But yeah, let me show you. And this involves some lunch boxes, I think. All right, so let's go in here. So I've prepared a piece of cardboard because I've got to go underneath here. All right, so in here is where the magic happens. So there's power here, very official install. The power point here, power plug rather, that powers the Shelly Uni and the pressure sensor in the tank. And then there is a big AC power point, which is for the solenoid, because that needs 24-volt AC. And that goes into this box here, where there is a Shelly Uni sitting in there. Now that's all strapped up, obviously out of the weather. This will be replaced with a proper junction box at one point. Thank you, Richard Campbell. But all the wiring goes in there, and it's the same setup as I did with the house tank, which there's a video on as well. But this means that I can now measure the depth of water in the Woolshed tank, and I can turn water on and off to it automatically, which is that big blue wire here. And there is the solenoid. So you can see there's a water hose going in there and one coming out, and I can turn this on and off, which means I can now fill the water tank, which is over there, automatically, or through Home Assistant. And that is really important. All right, so, and where does the water come from? Oh, let me show you. Get out of here. The water just comes from this tap here, just a garden hose for now, but that'll probably be upgraded. And that is from the bore tank. So that is the bore water that goes into it. And this is where we need also to control the transfer pump to put enough pressure to put it from there and all the way up into there, because obviously the water hose goes in the top. So that's step 2, which means we can now automatically fill the Woolshed tank from the bore tank. All right, and then finally, here's the house tank and gubbins. The house tank is also the furthest down the hill, so we live on a hill. And one thing that we found out, I think it was like 2 years after we moved in, is that there is a pipe going from the Woolshed tank to this tank. Yeah, and through physics and whatnot, that pipe is needed to prime this pump, because this tank is underground and the pump is higher than the water, etc. Yeah, don't let me get into that because it took forever for my brain to figure that one out. But I did a whole video on how to put in the depth sensor for this. Well, I actually did 2 videos. I have a version 1 and a version 2. Version 2 is what's in currently, of course, because that's the latest one. You know, we always have the latest version. So this here is quite a unique setup. So let me just show you all the bits. Yep. Okay. So we have, first of all, over here, we have another solenoid, which is that, just like the one up on the Woolshed tank. So that's the one I can turn the water on and off from. And that comes from down here, which is that gravity feed we call it, which is the pipe that comes from, where you can just see the Woolshed tank. It's up there, right? That's where we just were, just there. Oh, blurry finger. So there's an underground pipe all the way down here that then goes down to this pipe here, and I can just turn the water on and off from the Woolshed tank, which means we can fill up this house tank from the Woolshed tank, which is a lifesaver when we figure that one out. So this here is an overflow thing and also a manual turny-offy thing when we have to clean the filter, which is down here. There's lots of filters. So there's just, the plumbing here gets a bit silly. But over here, there's a similar lunchbox, which again is a temporary thing probably, but yeah, Richard Campbell loves these. which also has a Shelly in it. And that Shelly is also powered by a DC power supply, and then there is the solenoid powered by an AC power supply, and that's pretty important. We did kind of make a boo-boo on that to start with. So that means I can also now here control. I know how much water's in it, so I can control through the Shelly. I can get a sensor reader, and I can control the solenoid, which is powered into the Shelly's channel that you can switch on and off. Very, very, very neat. So with all these parts, actually, let me just put it back here. There's the house. So with all these parts, I can now automate the whole thing. But there's quite a few exceptions that need to sort of match up and conditions and things. So let's go back into Home Assistant and I'll show you how all of it is put together into one beautiful large automation. I'm going to start here on my water dashboard. It is the first tab on my Home Assistant dashboard because it is the most important on the farm. You can see here that I have 4 gauges for each of the, well, one for each of the tanks. Now the tank at Chris's tank at Chris's house, which is another house on the property, isn't part of this flow that I'm going to show you, but nonetheless we still monitor it, of course. But right now it is full as full. It is winter. Over in the last 24 hours, we've had 75 mil of rain, which in the imperial system is a different number. And that's a lot of rain, so everything is filled up nicely. So we're looking pretty good right now. But I can monitor everything on this panel. I can turn on this house tank gravity feed, which is the solenoid on the house tank. There's the Woolshed Tank solenoid. I can turn that on manually. There's the bore pump, there's the transfer pump, and then there's all the different levels, like all the information that I need to monitor the water. And if you watched my video on the wall dashboards that I did, the Home Assistant dashboards that sits on the wall, they also have these gauges on them because they are that important. We need to know where we are with water. We do not have time water. So that, I just want to show you that because that's a dashboard, and then there's the automation behind it, right? So this is all the manual stuff. So in Node-RED, which is still my favorite tool for automations, I find it visually appealing. I like all the UML type diagrams. It is really, really handy to try things out and see how things flow. I found it really, really handy. So let's go to water tanks. And here is the flow. So there's 4 flows here. There's one for each of the tanks that we looked at, and there's a maintenance flow. So let me talk you through them. So first of all, each of them is triggered by a timestamp. So just every 10 minutes I check. Every 10 minutes is fine. The first thing is I want to check how much water's in it, right? And you can see here the last check, there was 32,994 liters, approximately. And then because we have off-peak and peak power right here where we are, I check if we are at peak power usage. So if we are during peak power, well, we don't want to turn anything on because pumps are expensive to run. So we'd rather run them off peak. So if it is peak power, we turn it off. So we just check, has it already been turned off? Because I don't want to necessarily just keep switching things. And also because it sends notifications. I don't want to keep sending those every 10 minutes. So we get we turn off the bore pump if it isn't switched off, and then just for fun, I put this in my text-to-speech video. We get the current bore tank liters and we put that into a text-to-speech that announces how much water is on there. But that was more of a test. And there's a whole bunch of notifications for me and for Chris. And then if it isn't peak power, then we check if it's full or near empty, and that is just a switch statement. So we say, is it either over 35,000? Then we don't have to do anything. Or we want to switch it off because it's full. Or is it between 0 and 15,000? So it means it's almost empty, near empty, right? Liters. These are liters. And then we say, okay, well, if it's over 35,000, well, we just go to off. Right, we just turn it off. But if it isn't, if it's near empty, we check, well, if it's already on, because we don't want to keep turning it on, and again, putting out notifications. If it's not already on, then we turn on the bore pump, and we get a notification saying, hey, we turned on. Because I like to know when these things are working, and also because I'm not 100% sure this is all correct. Like, how do we know? So debugging information, right? So that's the bore tank. That's probably the simplest one. And then there's the Woolshed Tank. And again, we run it every 10 minutes. We get the Woolshed Tank volume. We check if it's peak power. If it is peak power usage, turn it off just like before. But we also turn off the transfer pump because we need that to put pressure down the hill to put water efficiently into the tank. But then we do one other step. I don't want to fill up the Woolshed tank if there's not enough water in the bore tank. We do not want the bore tank to run empty for multiple reasons. The main one is actually that there's so much sludge at the bottom of it that it would gunk up the pumps down the hill and the system. That's the main reason. Yes, we could get it cleaned. It probably wouldn't make a difference. So we check that the bore tank have enough water, over 20,000 liters, and that's just a simple logic check here. Check it, and then we that comes up with true or false, as you can see here. Is state is true or false. So if it has more than 20,000 liters, as in it's false that it has less than 20,000, follow me, then we check if it's already on, and then we turn on the Woolshed feed, that's the solenoid, and then we also turn on the transfer pump because we need pressure from the bore tank to put it into the Woolshed tank, right? That was the one that goes up and in and etc. And then we get notifications, right? So that's the bore tank and the Woolshed tank, and then the house tank is similar to the Woolshed tank. We get the volume of it, we check if it's peak power, and then we check if it's already off, etc., and then we turn it off if it's not already off. But then we also check that the Woolshed tank has enough water. We want to make sure, again, we don't drain any tank empty by filling up another tank. So if it isn't, as in if it does have more than 20,000 liter, then we can turn on the house tank feed, which is that solenoid that you saw in the house tank, and we can start filling up the house tank. And we don't need we don't have any, the transfer pump does not work for that system. Again, that is the rainwater part of the system, not the bore pump part of the system, but I've combined the two. So that's how that all links together. And I'd love for you to have questions about that. If I can do it better, does this logic not make entirely sense? What have I missed? Happy to be wrong or improve it. So let me know. And then finally, because pumps don't like not being used, they dry up, they go all crusty, and they stop working, they leak. So the bore pump, in winter, we don't usually have to run it because we have so much rain that the tanks fill up with rainwater, so we don't have to have this automated system running. So if the bore pump hasn't run for a month, we just turn it on for an hour. And if it's on a peak power usage, then we just wait 6 hours because the peak period is maximum 6 hours, and then we turn it on for an hour, the bore pump, and then we turn it off again. Just as a maintenance cycle, just to make sure that it runs regularly. So those are it took me a while to come up with this entire system. Obviously, there's a bit of trial and error, figuring out. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of Shellys, there's an M5 stack atom light for one tank. There's Shelly UNIs for two other tanks. There's solenoids, there's sensors in the tanks. There's many moving parts, but it is so worth it because now I don't have to worry. Everything fills up automatically. And you might be wondering, can you drink bore water? In this case, yes. Our bore water here is fine. It's quite rich in minerals, but it's perfectly safe to drink. So that is not an issue. And in fact, it gets better once it's been through 2 tanks, for whatever reason. So yeah, if you have any questions about this, I'd love to hear it. Yes, there are a lot of installations here that could be done better. I'm aware of that, but it's getting it working and then improving on it. If you're a software developer like me, that would make sense. So there's lots of little things that we're going to improve over time, putting things into proper weatherproof boxes, etc. But right now, none of it gets wet. It might look like it does, but it doesn't. All of it is out of the weather to a certain extent. We don't have the problem of many wetter regions where we just have moisture all the time, so we don't have as much of a problem with that. So there's many factors that play into this, but again, please do put any comment in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this because this has taken a long time to get right, but it's so good. It works. As always, if you like this kind of content, home automation, any of that sort of stuff, please consider subscribing. I'd love to have you as part of the community on this channel. And I look forward to seeing you, well, hearing from you in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.